2 or 3 months later, they said, we've understood nothing because it's all very complicated. And it's all in English. And then one of the little girls said, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes disease, we've understood nothing else. So I said, what?
In 1999, our guest carved a hole in a wall in a Delhi slum, installed a computer, and walked away. What happened next sparked a global movement. Children who'd never seen a computer before taught themselves how to use it, learned English, and explored everything from DNA to advanced mathematics without any formal instruction. This hole-in-the-wall experiment became the foundation for self-organized learning environments, otherwise known as SOLs, inspiring over 36,000 educators in 110 countries. It earned him a $1 million TED Prize in 2013 and the Brock Prize in 2022. But what makes his work so provocative is his radical claim that in an age of infinite information and AI, traditional education is obsolete. He argues the question matters more than the answer, and that children learn best when we simply get out of their way. His ideas have been celebrated by some as visionary and critiqued by others as naive. But in a world now transformed by AI, his 25-year-old experiments feel eerily prescient. Please welcome educational researcher and innovator, Professor Sugata Mitra. Thank you so much for saying yes and agreeing to this. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I understand it's a very popular podcast. I'm in Gateshead, England right now. I first thought I would dress up for your podcast, but the temperature dropped to 3 degrees and here I am in my warmest.
Must have been quite a shock coming from India to Newcastle. That's quite a jump.
Actually, I came from California. I spent some time every year now in California, where my grandson and son live, and some time in India and some time in Gateshead in England. And it's always fun, across these 3 continents, how different things are, and increasingly how similar they are. So it's fun.
Could you take us back to 1999? How did this all begin?
It's now 26 years ago. And you have to first imagine that world of 26 years ago in India. Personal computers had just about come in. They were extremely expensive. And very few people could actually afford a personal computer as a personal device. All of us professionals had computers, PCs in our offices, but not at home, except for a few rich guys who had them at home. And I had a few rich friends who had bought themselves computers. And they started to report a rather interesting thing. They said, the trouble with having a PC at home is that if you have little children, then they're extremely interested in the whole thing. And first thing you have to explain to them is that it's very expensive. PCs in those days was like 3 or 4 months' salary. It's very expensive. So, we told them, don't even think about it. But children, particularly toddlers, well, they're not going to leave it alone. So then a few of them, about just a few weeks later, said, hey, listen, you work with children occasionally. Tell me something. I think my daughter is gifted. So I said, yeah, well, why do you think so? Well, the other day I lost a file and I was hunting for it. These were the days of DOS, mind you, text DOS, disk operating system. I suddenly heard this little voice from behind saying, if you type dir/w/p, you'll get a list of all the files on your computer page by page. So I turned around to my 6-year-old daughter, not me, my friend, who was relating the story. I turned around and I said, how do you know that? And she said, well, you did that yesterday. You've forgotten. So I realized at that point in time that these children were actually watching us. So what my friend did was he allowed his daughter to use the computer and said, go ahead, you try. And then 2 or 3 days later, he said, my daughter's gifted because, she is doing this incredibly complicated things on the computer, none of which I really understand. And she's got games and I didn't know my PC had, etc. Then another friend, oh, my son, do you think he's gifted? He's doing. So I suddenly thought, well, all the children of all these rich guys seem to be gifted, and that can't be true. So maybe all children are gifted, at least as far as these PCs go, if only they had one. So that was the origin, because right outside our office in New Delhi, there was a slum. And I said, I'm going to give a computer to the children in the slum and see what happens. And people said, yeah, you'll get a broken computer. I said, okay, I want to see that. I need somebody to invest those $3,000 or whatever it cost in those days. And imagine that your money is just gone. I want to see how many pieces do they break it into. Anyway, the miracle is that my boss at that time, Rajendra Pawar, is quite a legendary character in India. He said, okay, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but you go ahead. So I took the computer, I took it into the slum. Where do you put a computer in a slum? There's no place to put it. I mean, you can't put it on the road. So then I said, I'm going to stick it on the wall, the boundary wall which separates the slum from my office. Now, how do you stick a computer? Well, you make a hole in the wall. You stick the monitor from my side of the wall through that hole. That's what I did. And that was the origin of the hole in the wall.
So there was no big, grand hypothesis, thesis. You didn't think this was going to happen, that's going to happen. It was like, I have no idea. Let's just see.
Exactly. It took a long time for me to convince the scientific community that is a way to do an experiment, because everybody said, you've got to have a hypothesis, you've got to have a methodology, you've got to have an experimental design. And I said, well, I didn't have any of those. I just wanted to see what will happen if I give a computer with no instructions, connected to the internet, working in English, to children who don't go to school in a slum in India. I just want to see what happens. Is that valid or not? To their credit, the British Journal of Educational Technology took it and said, yeah, you can ask a question like that. And what happened? And I said, well, a day later they were surfing. A couple of days later they were downloading music and downloading games. And about, I think, a month later, 4 or 5 weeks later, they'd found the equivalent of Google. There was no Google at that time. There was some kind of a search engine. I think it was Alta Vista. It was called Alta Vista. And they started typing things into it, and they told me that, and I said, what is that? What are you doing with that? And they said, yeah, this is it's a funny thing on this computer. If you type something into it, then it starts showing you all kinds of things. And I said, well, what do you type into it? They said, oh, any gibberish, PQXYCZN. And Alta Vista pops up, something or the other. They found it funny. About a month later, they discovered that they could actually type in a question if they knew what to type. So they started asking around people. They would ask somebody passing by in Hindi, they would ask that, if I want to ask about trees, what should I type in English? And this guy passing may or may not know a little bit of a smattering of English like most Indians do. He would say, type, what are trees made of? So the children would say, what? So they'll say, yeah, WHAT, what? ARER, and like that. And they typed a few words. And now they start getting an answer. The question then is, well, how do they read the answer? Because they seem to be able to tell me what the answer was. I couldn't figure that out for a long time until I realized that in a group of 50, 60 children who would be clustering around that one single computer on the wall, somebody understands one word, somebody else understands another, and another, and another, and it all gets put together. And they say, oh, this is what it's trying to say. I'd never seen reading like that before. I didn't know what to call it because I was thinking with the mind of a educational researcher. I had forgotten my old subject, which was physics. And one day it just sort of flooded into my mind. Oh, but this is simple. This is a self-organizing system. And there are many, many in nature where each part of a connected system, each part knows a little bit, but together they know the whole lot. Like bees building a beehive out of perfect hexagons. If you take a single bee, it has no clue about what a hexagon is or anything. But if you take 10,000 of them, they can build a perfect hive out of hexagons. Self-organizing systems. It's amazing. It's still something that people can't really wrap their minds around. That was 1999 when I first observed this self-organized learning environment. And then I tried it over and over and over. That story is documented all over the place. I tried in England, in South Africa, then across all 5 continents, and everywhere. If children have unsupervised inputs, if they are allowed to work in groups, they will self-organize. And when you look back at it, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? I mean, human beings self-organize all the time. That's how we are where we are today. We don't have the strength of a gorilla. We don't have the height of a giraffe. We can't run as fast as a leopard. But together, we can do anything.
In 2007, you headed to a remote village called Kalikuppam. This was 11 to 14-year-old Tamil-speaking kids. There was no English spoken there. What happened there? What happened in Kalikuppam?
Well, in Kalikuppam, I wanted to find how far children can go. By 2007, we already knew that groups of children can self-organize, they can teach themselves amazing things, etc. To my mind, the question was, but how far does this go? What if I take a village again, I take a remote area, I put in a hole-in-the-wall computer, and I put into it some really complicated stuff about DNA and biochemistry. Would they find that out? Would they learn it? And once again, my colleagues, like they had for all these years, said, that's rubbish. I mean, that can't happen. This is not magic. This is not sci-fi. I said, well, we won't know till we do it, will we? So that's how Kalikuppam began. Kalikuppam was chosen because in the Asian tsunami of 2004, the village had been wiped out. Its school had been wiped out. There was nothing there, nothing at all. So in the middle of that, I built a little hut. And in that hut, I made a hole-in-the-wall computer so you could cluster around it. And the children did because, children would cluster around an amazing thing like that. So they all clustered around it. And they were doing the usual things, playing the same games over and over again, laughing, talking. So I went up there and I said, there's something in this computer that's really interesting and really difficult. And they said, what? And I said, I won't tell you. And they said, oh, come on, Amir, what is it? I said, well, I can't tell you because I don't know very well myself what it is. But it's there as one of the symbols on the screen, I'd put in an icon with the university learning materials inside it. It's there somewhere inside that. But don't waste your time, I said. You'll never be able to figure it out. Now, that's the worst thing you can say to a 11-year-old because all of them said, we, at the moment I turned my back, they went straight for it. And then I think about 2 or 3 months later, when I went back, they said, we've understood nothing because it's all very complicated, horrible. It's, it's symbols, it's chemistry, uh, and it's all in English. So I said, okay, well, let's give up. Then shall we give up? You're sure you don't know anything at all? And then one of the little girls there, whose video I have actually from a scratchy video from those years ago, who said, well, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes disease, we've understood nothing else, she said. So I said, what? So she said, that's all I've understood. It's got something to do with DNA. And what is DNA? And we left them with a few more questions, and then it all followed. I gave them a test on the material that I had put, a test that is used in universities and also used in some of the upper class, really expensive schools in South India. And they got like 40%, which was amazing because they should have got zero, but they got 40%, which is a fail, but they got 40%. I thought, well, that's good, but remember my objective was how far can they go? So could they go further? What would I need to do? Everybody said, a teacher. So I said, yeah, but that's the one thing I don't have. A biochemistry genetics teacher out here? No way. But what I do have is there was an accountant from an NGO. All she knew was accounting, but she was a young girl. I called her, I think her name was Rekha. I said, listen, can you teach them some biochemistry? And she said, no, absolutely not. I don't know anything about it. I didn't even have science in school. I said, no. At that point, I don't know why I said it, but I said, what you do is you're friendly with the kids. Why don't you stand behind them and keep admiring them and say, wow, what's that? Can you explain that to me? Can you teach it to me because I don't know it? She did that for, I think, about 2 months. And apparently they had a lot of fun. At the end of 2 months, I gave them the test and they shot up over 60%. But there was no teacher. There was only a friendly adult, a friendly, encouraging adult. That's when I coined this term for what a traditional teacher would do in the age of the internet. And it was to say to her learners, to her children, you go there, I'll come with you. That's all. It's something we would say to children in a picnic or something like that. If there's what's behind that bush, and you'd say, well, I don't know, you go there, but I'm going to come with you, okay, just in case. And the children like it because they feel there's a certain sense of security. There's an adult there, so nobody can scold them later on for doing some, going behind the bush because she said you can go ahead. That little thing, that little mental uh, guarantee of approval took the scores 20 steps up from 40 to 60. And I said, what's this? Doesn't say quite in those words in any book on education that I could read, that you don't need to know what you're teaching. You just have to encourage. Is that a method? I tried publishing it. I don't remember which journal, but a good one again took it. Kalikuppam experiment. I think it was the Australasian Journal of Educational Technology. They took it. They said it's incredible, but we'll publish it because you've got data. And, your experiment is solid. So I published that. The whole thing got called a self-organized learning environment. And I took it to England and applied it into the schools of Gateshead, which is a poorer part of the country, and showed them that you could teach children, or no, not teach children. Children could learn anything by themselves.
I want to double click on something you just were speaking about, and it's this idea of encouragement, the power of somebody saying, wow, and encouragement. How important is that in the recipe?
Oh, extremely. As I said, the key sentence is, you go there, I'll come with you. You could add a lot to that. You could also say, I like you, I love you, etc. I don't think those things are as important as saying, I'll be with you.
So it's that safety, the safety to explore and to.
Yes, yes. And it's about friendship. I think we underplay friendship too much and overplay love and affection. Friendship is not exactly love. It's not exactly affection. Friendship is something else. We all know what it is, but we can't verbalize it. Friendship is an immense trust. That's what they need. That somebody trusts them, those poor children who have nothing, that somebody trusts them to find the impossible.
Schools as we know them are obsolete. This is not the same as saying the education system is broken. The education system is not broken, it's wonderfully constructed. Could you explain what you mean and what the differences are?
If you leave people to just grow up by themselves, like animals, by the time they're 12 or 14 or 16, they will obviously know a lot of things. But these things will not be structured in any way. It will depend on what environment they're growing up in. If they're growing up in a tribal area in India, without education, by 16, they would know how to build and operate a bow and an arrow to shoot down things. If you let them grow up without an education here in northeastern England, by 16 they would also know a lot of things. They would know what to drink, usually the wrong things, but they would know what to drink. They would know how to survive in a street kind of sense. But in both of these examples, they wouldn't know how to work out, for example, the square root of a number by hand. Maybe they wouldn't know what a square root is. The question is, how important is it to know what a square root is? Well, if you look back at your schooling, you can probably work your way through to a point where you'd say, well, I can tell you why you need to know what a square root is. It's to work out, areas or whatever. So back in somewhere in I guess the 17th or the 16th century, something like that, mostly in the British and Prussian empires, the forming British and Prussian empires of that time, I think people realized that you need to have a whole a whole populace who know approximately the same things. Because otherwise, how do you govern? If you say something, and if different people understand different things from it, that's not going to help you govern them. So, how do you make sure that everybody understands similarly? I think that probably is the germ of the education system as we know it. Take some children, teach them the same things. Teach them how to respond, and then see if their responses are uniform. That's the origin of the examination system. Everybody gets a 50 out of 50 or a 60 out of 100 or whatever it is. Once you've got this uniform kind of knowledge, it's funny I use the word uniform. Even what they wear has to be similar. It's called the uniform. So you want identical people because they're easy to govern. You know what will anger all of them. You know what will make all of them happy. You won't have any doubts in your mind that if I were to say this, then some would be happy and some would be unhappy. You try to even that out. It doesn't work, of course, but you try to even that out. That was what formal education became. Then came the issue of curriculum. Well, let's teach them the following things. The unsaid part is, let's not teach them the other things. Okay, I don't think anybody has done an analysis of what the curriculum does not contain. But that too is purposeful, isn't it? So certain things are to be taught and certain things are to be left out, in the hope that the end product will have the things that they were taught and will not know the things that they were not taught. Again, doesn't quite work, but that was the principle. Then teach them the sciences, teach them the liberal arts, etc., etc. I mean, we know the story after that, the 16th century, the 17th century. And then, because these were great empires, this was the age of the empire, they took this whole system from country to country, which didn't have it, erased the existing system that the country had, and put in this new system. Not because they were evil people, but because it would make that country easier to govern. You would know that if you said something, the people would understand it. This is what happened all over Africa, all over India, all over most of Southeast Asia, and so on. And by the early 20th century, we had an uniform world. All you need to do is look at the armies of different countries to see to what extent this uniformity goes. Whether you look at the armed forces of the United States or the armed forces of the UK or the armed forces of Uganda, they're all identical. Left, right, that kind of thing. That military origin was also flavored at some point by religion, because there are questions which fall into the domain of religion. What is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. Now we have a problem. There are no straight answers. The rest of education is all black and white, things fall down, that kind of thing. But what about these questions? Now the military infrastructure couldn't quite take on that sort of ambiguity. The people who stepped in was religion. And religion comes from a very simple point. This is right, this is wrong, is decided by something that is not human. And something that is so powerful that it is always right. So here it is. You can't question it. That was easy, because in the short span that you have in the education system, in those final years of the education system, this is the only way you could, without trying to derive what is true, what is false, you could just drill it in. So what happened in the 20th century was we knocked out philosophy. Because philosophy goes into details of how things are. I mean, you could say, well, you're saying this is true. Well, tell me why it's true. Knock out philosophy, that question goes. Remember, in a curriculum, we leave out certain things, so we left out philosophy. Socrates, Plato, they went out. The Buddha, the Vedas, they went out. What was left? religious doctrine. Why? Not because the educators were evil. The educators had a limited amount of time, a limited budget to achieve their objective of producing people who are uniform. This is where we were at the beginning of the 20th century. And then my old subject, physics, ruined the whole game. Because physics, which was the epitome of black and white, things go like this, things go like that. The universe is like a set of billiard balls flying around here and there. Everything broke down in the 1920s with a bunch of physicists saying, but if you go down to the subatomic levels, to the really tiny particles, they don't behave like that. They don't behave like billiard balls at all. They behave in very strange ways. Einstein used to call it spooky action. How do you put spooky action into the curriculum? Well, guess what? Even in 2025, we don't. We keep it as a little piece right at the end of the school education system. So there's something called quantum mechanics, it's all very, very complicated. Don't you bother with it. Billiard balls, Isaac Newton. This is the way the world works. We're still grappling with it. But in the meanwhile, people who could understand, the children in the fringe of the education system, who could grapple with uncertainty, with probabilities, with quantum mechanics, they started inventing stuff. The mobile phone that you use, this medium that I'm using to record, which goes across the waves from God knows which server to which server, the Starlink satellite signal that's beaming down stuff from all of it works not on the billiard ball model, but on the uncertainties of quantum mechanics. Things that can be in two places at the same time, things that affect each other over huge distances, taking no time at all. Things that don't even exist until you look at them. These were strange ideas. And as the 20th century shifted into the 21st, we can no longer ignore them because they are determining and dominating our lives. So is the education system broken? It's not. It was built for a purpose. I think I said it over and over again. It was built for a purpose. It fulfilled that purpose wonderfully well during the age of empires. It produced identical people. It tried to produce identical people. It tried to build in a picture of an orderly universe. It tried to put in a moral and ethical code that was dictated to us from above by some supernatural entity that you cannot question. But it's breaking down. The basis is breaking down. So what's going to happen? Are we going to just chuck the education system? Obviously not. But there are some changes. And I believe that I have a glimpse of what those changes might be. If we can make those changes, we will be back to collective efficacy. We will still be able to build a beehive knowing nothing at all.
Those changes, what are those glimpses telling you?
Well, in very, very simple terms, take the curriculum, first of all, the syllabus or the curriculum. Instead of a list of things we know, which is what it is right now, a curriculum is a list of everything we know. What's wrong with that? Well, that list keeps growing. As any teacher will tell you, how much can I teach in that one semester? Every year it increases, as knowledge grows, etc. Instead of making the curriculum out of the things that we know, what if we made the curriculum out of the big things that we don't know? That list, if we do our stuff right, that list should grow shorter with time as we understand more and more. So, would that work? Well, I've tried it. I've tried it in the schools in England, and children love it. If you say, can something be in two places at the same time? And they say, what do you mean? Say, I mean, like, can it be here and can it be there? Yeah, if I move it from here to there. But can it be here and can it be there at the same time? They said, no, can't be in two places at the same time. And I'd say, well, shall we just examine it? Shall we think about it? Why don't you ask the internet? And there'd be hubbub going on, And these are, 10, 11-year-olds. And they'd say, oh, Sugata, you know what? Quantum probability. They go on and on about something or the other. It can happen. And I remember one instant where the school ended. I mean, my time was up and it was the end of school. So they queue up. They queue up at the entrance of the school, waiting for their buses or their parents or whatever. So there's a queue. So I went there, and they used to quite like me because I used to tell them all sorts of weird things. So they said, "Oh, Sugata's here." I said, "Yes, yes. Shall we try one last thing?" And they said, "Yeah." So I said, "Okay." Every alternate person turn around and face the back. So you're the first guy facing front, second guy facing back, third girl facing front, fourth girl facing back, like that. And then said, well, have we still got a line? Have we still got a queue? And some said, yeah, we're in a line. No, we're not. Until one girl, I don't know, I hope that girl wins the Nobel Prize one day. One girl said, Sugata, there are two lines and they're in the same place at the same time. One facing this way, one facing the other. And I said, whoa. And their teacher, my good friend, Emma said, what are you trying to do, Sugata? This is quantum stuff. I said, yeah, well, they're 10 years old. I said, yes, yes. In their world, it will be very important. And this was about 10 or 15 years ago. 15 years ago. And today, indeed, it is very important.
AI is a crutch for the brain, much like eyeglasses and prosthetic limbs are crutches for other faculties. Can you elaborate on that idea?
Any technology is a crutch of some sort. I mean, that's why we invented it. The first club was a crutch or an amplifier of strength or an amplifier of the length of your arm. A walking stick is a crutch for your sense of balance, makes it easier to walk. A bicycle is an efficient crutch. It lets you go the same distance in a shorter time. Eyeglasses, they're crutches. They let you read when you cannot. And so on. I could go on and on, but in a sense, every piece of technology is a crutch. It lets you do something a little better or a little differently than you could. And in some cases, it lets you do things that you couldn't even do without them. So if I look at it that way, then could I not say that AI are brain crutches? They let you get from one place to another a little more quickly than you could otherwise. A sort of bicycle for the brain. I could look at it that way. I could look at it as amplifier. They could let you do things which you otherwise would not be able to do. Nothing wrong with that. We have lots of amplifiers. I mean, a lever is an amplifier. It amplifies your strength so that you can break or open something which you couldn't have done otherwise. If I look at AI that way, then AI indeed is a crutch.
What's lost if we, society, stop valuing knowledge retention? And what's gained?
First of all, we need to look at a couple of words. The word that I am really puzzled by is the word knowing. We use it all the time. I know this, I know that, I don't know this. But what is knowing? Well, you could directly associate it with memory sometimes and say that if there's a fact which you have stored in your brain, then that's knowing. So I could for example say, in which year was the Sputnik launched? And if I were to give you the right year, then you would say you know that. Well, in this case, I don't remember. So the right answer would be I don't know. I think it was somewhere in the 1960s. So then you would say, well, you don't actually know it, but you know a little bit. But what is this knowing? And why is it important? One of the things I could think of was that if you lost on a ship in the middle of the ocean and you have nothing with you, nothing at all, and you need to know where on the planet you are, what would you do? Well, if it's daytime, you would look up and see where the sun is. But that doesn't tell you very much except for perhaps what time of day it might be, approximately. It tells you which way is east, which way is west, approximately. From the height of the sun over the horizon, you could tell perhaps your latitude. For example, if you see that the sun isn't actually going down and dropping into the ocean, but is actually going around like this, then you know that you're probably in the northern or the southern hemisphere, somewhere at the top or towards the top or whatever. How would you know all of this? From stuff that you've kept inside your head, because remember, you're on this ship and you have nothing. If it's night time and you see the stars, then you know how to spot the pole star. They taught you that in school. Draw a straight line from the belt of the Orion, and where it intersects with one little bright star, well, that's north. That's the pole star. So you could figure out the pole star, and you know which way is north. But do you know how far up north you are? Well, depending on the altitude of the pole star, you could make a guess. All this is coming from what you already know, what was put into your head. Jump to today. Imagine that you're on the ship, you're lost, you have nothing except for a mobile phone. And there's just a bit of battery left in it. You look for a signal. Mercifully, there is one, just one little bar which shows you a signal. You tap Google Maps and you tap where you are. A totally different set of skills, but it tells you where you are without your knowing anything about latitudes and longitudes and stars and sun positions and all of that. Have we gained or have we lost? I don't know. If an 18th century sailor were to see you doing that with your phone, he'd probably say, well, what is that thing and what are you doing with it? He would think you're a magician. If you were dropped into the 18th century and saw a sailor figuring it out by looking at the sun and the stars, you would think he's a mathematician, he's brilliant. Brilliance is different for different eons, for different stages of human history. So if we don't know what knowing is or how important it is, then once again, what is the purpose of education? Or how should education be changed so that you know the right things at the right time.
And this ties into this idea where you say finding out is more important than knowing.
Yeah, exactly. So knowing certain things was important in the 18th or 19th centuries. Knowing some other things is more important now than knowing those things. So the relative importance of knowing things changes with time. So what you need to know changes with time. The amount you need to know also changes with time, and now has increasingly become a problem because of AI. It would almost appear as though you didn't need to know anything at all. But you need to be able to ask the right question. Because if you didn't know how to ask the right question, how would you get any answer at all? It would be like the whole hole in the wall children initially when they were typing random letters of the alphabet into the search bar and something was popping out, but they didn't know what they had asked and they didn't know what the answer was. So we don't want to go there again. We need to know how to ask.
There's a growing discussion on the idea that outsourcing our thinking to AI is making students dumber. Not just students, all of us. What's your take on that?
Well, how about this? Outsourcing our chewing to knives and forks has resulted in our having weaker teeth than our ancestors. We have lost a lot. How do you like that? So,
It's an interesting reframe. I wasn't expecting we were going there, but I appreciate it.
well, I'm saying, you know, different things have different value at different points in time, as I said earlier. So, lost a lot. Lost a lot of what? Lost a lot of stuff that you don't need anymore. So why do you call it losing?
We have since the dawn of time. We experiment, we try new things, we let go of what becomes outdated, and then we have new skill acquisition. So maybe this is no different to any other time, or this is the craziest, most transformative moment in human history, and this is different. Even though we always think it's different, maybe this really is different. I don't know.
I would go with the first part of what you said, as opposed to the second part, which says maybe this is more different than ever before. What is different about today is that the change is happening more quickly, as we had always expected. We are on the exponential of change. We probably hit the exponent. Some people think that we are going to hit the discontinuity, the part where the change becomes almost vertical. So every second is different from every other second. That is very different about our time. We are on the upper part of the exponent. However, is it very different from transformational change that has happened before? I doubt that. I mean, starting with even a simple thing like the discovery of fire or how to control fire, which I think led to our entire civilization, was also transformational. The invention of the zero, which is a number, but it's not a number until you look at it. Well, was that transformational or what? It's thousands of years ago, but somebody really transformational would have had to think of numbers that way, that there should be a number, which is a number only when you look at it and not otherwise. The zero. Um, and so on and on and on to right through to DNA. The fact that biology is closely interlinked with information science, that every generation is physically passing on information about their bodies and perhaps about their minds through a string of atoms, through a string of molecules. That was transformational. Where is it all going to land up? Should we ever compare and say this one was more transformational than that one? I don't think so. I think the fact that we can make transformational changes makes us really different from any other species that we know of on the planet. That's the one thing that we can, I think, with some confidence say. And where does this come from? This ability to make transformational changes, to join ideas which you wouldn't have dreamed of joining together, and then forming a new idea out of that impossible joint. Where does it come from? Some say it comes from the prefrontal cortex. Some say it comes from the sizes of our brains. Wherever it comes from, that is the evolutionary step that seems to not exist in the other species. Even the highest of them don't seem to do that. Yes, they can build a tool once in a while, but they cannot make these connections which are transformational. Why did that happen? Is it just an experiment of nature's to see what would happen if that ability were to be given to a species? Or is it a part of the way in which evolution proceeds? If the latter, then where does it go? It seems to go more and more from substance to idea. If you look at an invention like the steam engine, that was a lot of substance, including the pressure of steam. But if you jump forward to the way AI figures out meaning, there is no substance in that. At the moment, all we know is it's matrix multiplication. Why should that have anything to do with meaning? Idea again. It's not substance. If I stretch that line further, where would we land up? Maybe to where there is no substance whatsoever. There is only idea. And the philosophers, starting with Plato, have actually said that. They've said that there is an idea of things which is the pinnacle of everything there is. So if I say, here is my thumb, then there is something called the idea of a thumb, which is the Platonic thumb, the ultimate thumb, of which this is only one. So if that's the direction we're going in, then we are essentially dematerializing ourselves. That sounds very esoteric, but if you look at the number of things we've already dematerialized, there used to be big ledgers with accounts in them and accountants. We've dematerialized the whole thing. Banks, we've just about dematerialized them. The stock market, we've dematerialized industry. We've dematerialized a whole lot of things, including reading and writing. We write, but we don't write with anything anymore. Press of your fingers on a keyboard produces what? Zeros and ones somewhere. So we as a species seem to be in this business of dematerialization. And that kind of uh, satisfies me in a way. I can't prove it, but it satisfies me because so many people have said it before. So many people, from Socrates and the Buddha right through to Pinker and the fellow physicists, they've all said we dematerialize. So if we can sense it somewhere inside that this is the way to go, then maybe we are somewhere, I'd like to say somewhere close to it. But who is to say? Who is to say how far away it is still?
What would you want to leave us with? What do you take from all these quarter of a century of experiments?
Well, if I had to try to make a list, and I'm doing this on the fly, is it the end of education? No, definitely not. Is it the end of the teacher? Absolutely not. AIs need teachers as much as children do. So in fact, it makes the teacher's job even harder in the future. It's a different job. We need a change in the curriculum to the big things that we don't know. Our focus should be on the big things that we don't know, the harder stuff. What humanity doesn't know yet, the internet doesn't know either. And if the internet doesn't know it, AIs don't know it either. We are back to our primordial prefrontal cortex to solve that. That's what education should be about. So what should teachers do? Point her children at those big unknown questions and say, you go there, I'll come with you.